Franchises. Multiple video games and a single IP. Sequels. We're often talking about how bad they are, how they're beating a dead horse, but sometimes a franchise deserves another entry. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 20 game franchises that desperately need a comeback. Starting off with number 20, it's BioShock. We have been hearing rumors about a potential BioShock revival for many, many years. It's the go-to prediction for wannabe leakers. Is State of Play starting? Or an Xbox Direct or a Cozy Games conference? You bet someone is going to say the next BioShock is going to be announced. So far, it's just that. Rumors, grumblings, the he said, she said bullshit. Sorry, my inner Fred Durst came out for a moment. Yeah, nothing. It's a series that's way too big not to bring back eventually, right? There's just money left on the table. But how and in what form is always up in the air. The original dev team and the great leader, Kevin Levine, left Take-Two to form a new studio, which was then acquired by Take-Two, and now they're publishing their new game, which is suspiciously BioShock-like, but has the numbers filed off, which is weird. The numbers are filed off despite the fact that they have access to the IP. It's whatever. It's going to inevitably lead to a new BioShock game, right? Hopefully with Levine at the helm. I could just write this whole thing off and say that Judas is the new BioShock, but it looks pretty different, until Booker and Andrew Ryan show up in the third act at some point. Man, wouldn't that be awesome if Judas was a stealth sequel to BioShock? It's probably not. Now, BioShock is a controversial franchise. BioShock 2 was regarded as not as good and then got a reevaluation later. Same goes for BioShock Infinite. But really, I just want to see that old-timey aesthetic combined with some sort of political or ideological angle that gets it a unique flavor. Just making an immersive sim in an isolated location isn't enough. Otherwise, Prey is a BioShock game. What we want is a return to those vibes that the best parts of the original games gave us. Doesn't need to be Rapture. Doesn't need to be Columbia. Remember, BioShock is an insane multiverse, which is why Judas could be a stealth sequel. I don't know. I will say BioShock Infinite got a little lost in the meta-narrative and lacks some of the environmental storytelling that made the original BioShock as engaging as it was. But the combat, to be fair, is quite a bit better, and the skylines are fun as hell to ride around on, especially in battle. You could say these types of games have been done to death, wandering around spooky corridors and listening to audio logs. You could say it's played out. But, it's not exactly a problem or the genre's fault it got bad because it got popular. Everybody and their mother tried to make one of these things at some point, and I think the fact that a lot of them aren't as good as the big ones, BioShock probably being in the top 3, along with the games that inspired it, System Shock 2 and Thief. But just like with those games, the tough thing is making something new and, to some extent, something that maybe works better. Like, as great as these games were, a lot of that was the content rather than the mechanics. Sometimes the mechanics were a little wonky in all of these types of games, but you gotta capture what made the original game so great. And that's probably why it's taken them so long to make something with BioShock. And number 19 is Splinter Cell. Losing Michael Ironsides, the iconic voice of Sam Fisher, was kind of the death blow to the franchise. Never recovered after 2013's Blacklist, which completed the main character's transformation from grouchy and sardonic super spy to generic military man number 136. Seriously, you hear this guy's voice? He'd be indistinguishable as a background grunt in any Call of Duty campaign.
I'm entering the plaza. Militia's blocking the front door access.
Sam, you need me to change position? Meet you on the ground?
Get eyes from the southwest corner of the plaza.
Copy. Moving now.
Grim, keep trying to reach our contact. Let me know if you get through.
Copy.
The voice change was utterly devastating. Cannot be understated just how bad that new voice was. So the series has a tough uphill battle if it's ever coming back. There have been rumors of a possible reboot or remake of the first game that have been floating around for years, but so far nothing has come of it. Ubisoft is just terrible at remaking their games. Remember Prince of Persia, the Sands of Time remake? It was supposed to come out in like 2020, 2021, and now they're saying 2026. Guys, that game wasn't complicated. What is going on over there? So the chances of this series coming back anytime soon are unlikely, but come on, it's got to come back eventually, right? Once upon a time, stealth was Metal Gear Solid and Splinter Cell. That was the two premier stealth series. Serious prestige there. The first 3 games sold gangbusters. They innovated the stealth genre in a lot of important ways, and they were a staple of the gaming ecosystem for a pretty good stretch. But once the initial trilogy was done, Ubisoft really couldn't quite figure out what they wanted the series to be. If it were up to me to revive the series, I'd go back to the semi-realistic artistic roots, set the story in a somewhat plausible reality, focus on what makes the series great with hardcore, in-depth stealth systems, and focus on the best parts of the original game and, taking some inspiration for more recent stealth games that really knock it out of the park, like the World of Assassination Hitman trilogy, and make some massive non-linear levels with lots of sub-objectives that can affect the course of the mission. There's so much you could do here, and with Metal Gear Solid MIA for the time being, there's definitely room for a new king of stealth games, and Splinter Cell could easily be it. Just don't make it another generic open world game. That's the only real, pratfall or obstacle I could foresee. Just bring it back, guys. At number 18 is Legacy of Kain. For how popular they were and still are, it's crazy there has not been a real attempt at reviving this franchise. Yeah, we got that oddball Nosgoth multiplayer game that nobody wanted, but a real follow-up's just never materialized. There isn't even a bare minimum, like a new compilation or a remaster of Soul Reaver. There's nothing. There was supposed to be a sixth entry in the franchise that was going to follow the story post-Defiance, but it got canceled. Fans found footage from another canceled sequel called Dead Sun, but still, just nothing. There's nothing. It's a shame because there was never anything quite like the Legacy of Kain games. Even when the last few entries of it weren't stellar, they still had an amazing atmosphere and top-notch voice acting.
And so I returned to the sanctuary of my enemy, the fortress of the Sarafan Brotherhood, deemed impossible for any man to penetrate. Impossible for any man.
It'll be tough to make a new game without the dulcet tones of Tony J, but he wasn't a main character, so they could make it work. The hard part, I think, is finding somebody to actually develop it. The studio most associated with the series, Crystal Dynamics, is pretty much the Tomb Raider team. We know that the Embracer Group acquired the IP along with several other Square Enix-owned Western IPs, but it's unlikely they're making a new Kain game anytime soon, because of everything involving Embracer. Seriously, disastrous couple years for that company. If they're canceling Deus Ex games mid-production, Legacy of Kain doesn't stand a chance, right? It's a real shame because it's not hard to imagine what a modern version of this series would look like. It'd feel right at home with all the other dark fantasy action series that are actually pretty popular now. It'd just have a more cinematic style to it. And yeah, that would be fun. I'd like that. The return of such a venerable franchise, assuming the game was good, would be an easy slam dunk. From my perspective, it seems like a safe bet. The problem is that it was in the hands of Square Enix, who were going to do nothing with it, and then Embracer, who is Embracer. They're probably going to do nothing with it for now. I think for a while, they're probably going to be working on, patching the hole in their boat. Those guys are treading some water. Let me tell you, I'm still kicking them when they're down, But, yeah, it's a franchise that's stuck in limbo, owned by publishers who either refuse or can't make a new game, but they also don't want to sell it to someone else because, at some point, right? And number 17 is Dishonored. Yeah, Redfall was a flop, and Arcane is in kind of a tough spot right now with the closing of their Austin, Texas-based studio. But now's the perfect opportunity to salvage their reputation by going back to what they do best and making a new Dishonored game. They kind of sort of wrapped up the story of the games with Death of the Outsider, but there's a lot they could do with it. The setting's so unique that it feels like a big waste ending the series after 2 games, especially after they showed the kind of innovative stuff they can do with the setting with levels like the Clockwork Mansion and the time travel tricks and Behind the Slab. I mean, that was limited by PS4 hardware. Imagine the kind of crazy stuff they could come with now for a third game. The possibilities are just endless. And that's what made these games so fun. Each level felt like a sandbox where you could explore everything as thoroughly as you wanted. Finish a mission in 5 minutes or 5 hours. It's up to you. There was an unprecedented amount of player freedom in these games. It just made them such a joy to play. You could play them straight. You could go completely nuts with all these powers at your disposal. The stealth was fun. The powers were fun. Running and sliding, that was fun in of itself. I don't know what it was about Dishonored sliding. It was just so freaking fun to do. I know other games have it, but it just felt better there. Arcane has said the series is on hold, and they're currently working on a Blade game, which, with another developer, I'd probably be pretty hyped with. But I don't want an immersive sim with Blade, and I certainly don't want them not making an immersive sim to make generic Blade Souls-like TM. Like, they know how to make immersive sims. That's what they should be doing. Give Blade to Platinum Games or some shit. That'd be a hell of a game. I'm guessing it's probably just going to be a safe, stupid IP-based game. Microsoft probably isn't going to let them throw any Hail Marys with the closing of half of them, the paylords, Like, obviously, I hope Blade is good and I hope it's successful because I want the studio to stick around for a very long time, and I think that whole idea probably has something to do with that. If they throw down and give us something completely unimaginable, great. But I'll tell you what's a really safe bet for a studio. The thing that made them famous. At number 16 is Dino Crisis. With all the revivals Capcom's been making recently, there's one series that's still conspicuously absent. Dino Crisis. It's Resident Evil with dinosaurs. There is nothing else to say. There's only two things anyone knows about these games. There's Regina, the main character who's iconic. She's essential. Bringing her back is non-negotiable. And then there's dinosaurs. Like, you just need to have those things, and it's that game. Maybe don't set it in space. That's what they did in Dino Crisis 3. That didn't work out too well and arguably killed the series. But hey, it's not too hard to make a good dinosaur shooter, right? It's been a long freaking time, too. Dino Crisis 3 was in 2003. It's been more than 20 years since there's been a new entry in this series. That's a long time to wait for a follow-up. And they brought back Dragon's Dogma, for Christ's sake. Not that that wasn't a big success. It absolutely was. But that wasn't a guarantee. The original was, not a big success. Not until late in the game with a lot of word of mouth and Steam sales, at least. And no, Exoprimal doesn't count. It's completely unrelated to the Dino Crisis series. It surprised me, too. At number 15, Red Faction. This one is another one very close to my heart. Probably nearly as close, if not as close, as Dishonored. Sadly, with the death of Volition, the hope that there would ever be a new Red Faction game is pretty much dead. If we're being honest, the writing was on the wall for a long time. Didn't seem like Saints Row was capable of making another Red Faction guerrilla. Like, they couldn't even make a game like it that was a direct follow-up. It seems like they probably weren't gonna do something as complex programming and physics-wise after Agents of Mayhem and the Saints Row reboot. It's sad, but it's the truth. Red Faction was a series long dead before Volition even closed its doors. And you could argue that might be part of why Volition closed its doors. But then again, a Red Faction reboot like the Saints Row reboot wouldn't have exactly made me happy either. That doesn't mean we don't want anyone, to make a new one. I mean, I guess they could go back to the series' roots and make a first-person game with some modular destruction elements. The follow-up to Guerrilla kinda was that a little. But you know what everyone wants, and it's not wandering around a mine blowing up tiny chunks of wall. We want a new Red Faction Guerrilla. That's what the world wants, but the gaming industry steadfastly refuses to give us that. Yeah, there's been some fun little indie games that show off unimpressive amounts of destruction. Teardown comes to mind. It's probably the most fully formed of them, but the rest of them are more or less tech demos. You can argue that the Finals incorporates probably the most extensive version of that nowadays, but it's also not Red Faction Guerrilla. Does that make me mad at the Finals? Absolutely not. The Finals is precious to me. But it is also not Red Faction Guerrilla. It's a multiplayer shooter. We're talking about Red Faction Guerrilla. The thing I want here is Red Faction Guerrilla. Like, okay, so if you've ever played the Finals, you do basically know what a modern game could look like with Red Faction Guerrilla's procedural destruction. They handled it, in fact, actually better than Red Faction Guerrilla. So imagine that in a Red Faction Guerrilla reboot or sequel. Best friggin' thing ever. But so far, nobody's willing to attempt it, at least not on the level that the game did. It wasn't just test chambers or short little missions. It was an entire open world with so many things to smash. Yes, the world was mostly barren with a lot of canyons that conveniently separated each area so the game could run on an Xbox, but those were necessary compromises that the setting itself, Mars, actually, in my opinion, kind of justified. So many of those problems will be solved now, but with the gaming community so focused on fidelity, I think developers are afraid to make games that don't look perfect, but still incorporate some amazing technology. At least when you're talking about the ones that are capable of looking a lot better. With a lot of indie studios, to be fair, pixel art's about as good as they could do with the idea and the budget that they might have. And that is in no way their fault. They're the little guys, and they put out incredible stuff too. It's just somebody publishing a Red Faction game can do a lot more, and as far as I know, they're just not willing to put the money into something as experimental as this, even though the original game's extremely popular among the people who actually played it. I wouldn't hold my breath for this series coming back. This is another one that got embraced because Embracer back in 2018 bought Koch Media, who was not called Koch Media anymore. They have a name that I'm not sure how to say, and I don't care enough. Embracer's who owns Red Faction. That's what matters. At number 14 is Deus Ex. Like I said early in the Legacy of Kain entry, the rights to Deus Ex were purchased by Embracer. Fun how there are reasons so many games don't get made. Being a games publisher. They were gonna make a new Deus Ex, but that got canceled. Hope was formed and then dashed in a single sentence. No matter what the flavor of Deus Ex you're into, be it the original year 2000 game or the prequels Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, or if you're nasty and begotten the sequel Invisible War, regardless, you want a new game. It's one of the seminal works of cyberpunk in video games with some really impressive world building and crazy immersive environments. Personally, I'd like a new game more in the tone of the original game with its conspiratorial themes and unusual philosophical diversions. Maybe with a little bit more of the gameplay of the Adam Jensen game. Even so, I would take a brand new Adam Jensen game with no major, tonal shifts back to the more original tone. But the voice actor for Adam Jensen's all but confirmed the prequel games are dead, which sucks because they never got to finish their story. I mean, the conclusion was going to be the original Deus Ex, but a lot of plot threads of Mankind Divided were never resolved, and Jensen's true nature was also never truly revealed. Lots of unanswered questions and a whole lot of potential just left fallow. And now that everybody loves Cyberpunk 2077, despite its initial disastrous launch, it's going to be a tough act to follow. If they made a new Deus Ex now, it's going to get compared to that game, which is a full open-world RPG. Deus Ex doesn't need to be that huge. It needs to be a dense world with an interesting story, but the way games are made now, a lot of publishers don't think that's enough. It is, but they don't think it is. At number 13, Onimusha, another entry, another Capcom franchise trapped in the past. Onimusha should be an easy sell. It's Devil May Cry before Devil May Cry. It's the first real offshoot of the Resident Evil series that went full-on action rather than horror. Those original games on the PlayStation 2 were great. For some reason, Capcom only ported the first one to modern hardware, but all four of them are really good. Onimusha 3 especially, I would put up there with some of the all-time great action games. It's fantastic and has a completely nutso premise. Yeah, that's the one with Jean Reno. Time travel is involved. It is fantastic. Batshit nuts in the best way. Games set in Japan are just as popular as ever. Just this year, we've gotten several of them. Hell, Capcom put out Kunitsugami, which is, by the way, fantastic. I've been singing Kunitsugami's praises since it came out. Not enough people played it. If you like Pikmin, tower defense, and action games, it's those three things at once. And it does it well. Seriously, try it. It's such a good game. Nobody's saying no to more samurai, though. And for whatever reason, Capcom refuses to give Onimusha, the series, the respect it deserves. Maybe there's rights issues. The games did use celebrity likenesses for a lot of its characters, but I don't know. I kind of doubt that. Also, I don't really care. I just want more Onimusha. Revive the franchise, give it that Devil May Cry 5 coat of paint, and it'll sell gangbusters. I promise you. I know Capcom is interested in reviving long-dormant franchises, so anything's on the table. So, it's just a matter of them doing it. So, Capcom, do it. At number 12 is Mega Man X, or Mega Man Legends, or Mega Man Battle Network. They brought back the original Mega Man with Mega Man 11, but after that game proved successful, they stopped. Yeah, they've been putting out collections for a while now, and it's cool we can all play the Mega Man X games pretty easily nowadays. And they've got the Zero and Battle Network games all in one convenient package there, but those are all old games. I want something new. You'd think we would have gotten a new X game at this point, right? That seems like the most obvious thing to do after 11, but it hasn't happened. For many folks growing up, this is the definitive series. I played Mega Man on the NES from the start, and X is, in my opinion, the definitive series. Part of the problem, I think, is that Capcom kind of oversaturated the market, and the last three games in the series are all different levels of absolutely terrible. They really didn't realize that you just have to make Mega Man X as Mega Man X. You come up with new levels. You don't reinvent the wheel. The innovation is in the levels and adding new powers and stuff like that. It's not, I don't want a 3D Mega Man X. It doesn't work. Is it terrible? No. But relative to any good Mega Man X game, yes, it is terrible. Also, let's talk Mega Man Legends, right? There was going to be a sequel, but it got canceled, and the series has just been nostalgia bait ever since. Hell, they could at least make a new Battle Network game. Those were crazy popular games. They have one of the most interesting battle systems in any RPG. Seeing a modern version with new bells and whistles would be freaking awesome. Like, think about Mega Man Battle Network looking like Persona. Hell, Capcom's got the money. Just partner with Atlas and do it. I don't think Sega would be too upset to take some cash there. Like, there's so many dead Mega Man franchises. Really, if you want to split hairs, Mega Man. Like, where's 12? 11 was a fully realized badass sequel. It was hard as hell. But, I mean, not the hardest in the Mega Man series. It doesn't need to be the hardest. They gave us some pretty good levels. In 2018... At number 11 is Time Splitters, the true spiritual sequel to GoldenEye 007. It's not Perfect Dark. Well, it is, but they made Perfect Dark Zero, which sucked, and Time Splitters got 2 great follow-ups. So I ask you, which is the franchise that truly deserves a follow-up? Both. In a perfect world, but if in an imperfect world where you can only pick one, it's got to be Time Splitters, all right? There's really nothing quite like these games. They've got the perfect amount of multiplayer chaos. Their single-player campaigns are fun and quirky. They're just great games that manage to be the best spiritual successor while having a unique identity of its own. What really kills me about this one is there was gonna be Time Splitters 4. It was happening, and it got embraced. Like, if it's any indicator, Embracer has a lot to answer for. It seems like every other game on this list, it was going to get a comeback, and then Embracer embraced everything about it. The hope is still alive for Time Splitters, though anything's possible when you're writing pie-in-the-sky YouTube lists. These kinds of lists aren't necessarily wish fulfillment. It's more wish having. If you put it out there, it's better than not putting it out there, right? That's what I'm doing here. Time Splitters is a series that, by all accounts, should return. It exists in its own little niche. There really aren't other games like it doing exactly what it does. The variety of weapons, the goofy modes, the GoldenEye-style aiming, the varied campaigns, oh, and the cartoonish art style. It's really just a unique series. There is no other, and it deserves a proper comeback. And number 10 is Banjo-Kazooie. File this one under duh. Everyone wants a new Banjo. People put millions of dollars kickstarting what is essentially a clone game. And to be frank, Banjo-Kazooie had moved beyond that paradigm and moved into being Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom's building stuff long before that even existed. And it wouldn't bother me to see some of that stuff return in a true Banjo sequel. But here's the thing. Where's Banjo? Bring back Banjo. Everyone wants Banjo. People went batshit crazy when it got announced for Smash. But Rare nowadays is not the same company that made the various SNES and Nintendo 64 classics, Banjo-Kazooie being one. Not to say their recent output is bad, there's just none of it, or at least not much of it. It's not bad though, just not what the fans of their old games want. They were the guys who did collectathons probably the best. The big cartoonish levels where we run around picking up tons of crap for some reason while giant Kirk Hope's bouncy score plays. We want power-ups and minigames and all that stuff that these games are known for. What a lot of people don't want is the custom vehicles aspect. I like the custom vehicles aspect. I think that it could exist inside the traditional Banjo-Kazooie paradigm, not be the primary focus of it, and be quite enjoyable, honestly. But Nuts and Bolts is not the game that most fans wanted. In hindsight, I think it's an interesting game. Very creative. Again, like I said, did Tears of the Kingdom before Tears of the Kingdom. If Nuts and Bolts was just a spin-off and a third proper game had come out, I don't think anybody would be sour about it. But the third game never happened. At this point, just give the license to the clone guys, the ukulele guys. I mean, all the founders of Playtonic, the creators of ukulele, came from the original Rare that Rare isn't anymore. So they have a pretty good grasp on how that kind of game works. The original ukulele was a little rough, but the side-scrolling sequel was actually a lot better. If Rare's not going to have anything to do with Banjo, though, they might as well, let somebody else do it the right way. It doesn't need to be, earth-shaking. It just needs to be Banjo-Kazooie. And number 9 is Burnout. It seems like every major racing game focuses on semi-realism, cartooning and following race lines and driving carefully and precisely. That's what Need for Speed and Forza and Test Drive Unlimited all want to do these days. The lack of a game like Burnout is conspicuous. Where are the insane speeds, the boosts, the gnarly crashes? Most racers basically don't have car deformation anymore. What is that? And I'm not saying that's exclusive to more arcadey or insane stuff like Burnout. There is pretty good car deformation in a few various racing games, like Beam NG Drive, but you don't get the same absolute decimation that can be inflicted on a vehicle in a game like Burnout. Imagine a modern AAA Burnout with physics like Beam NG Drive. That'd be insane. Soft body physics Burnout would be, that'd be a perfect game. These games are all about aggression. You crash opponents, crash into traffic in the environment, and you just keep going. Crashing isn't a fail state. Half the time it is the goal. And it's got the aftertouch ability where you can steer your car after crashing, which allows for some vengeance even when you're careening out of control. These games are freaking awesome. Either the originals or the open world Burnout Paradise. I'm fine with a follow-up in either direction. The only big thing I absolutely cannot do without is crash mode. It's one of the greatest game modes in history. They somehow turn a four-way pileup into a satisfying puzzle. The saddest thing about this series is the studio that made them is still around. Criterion's still with EA, but they're stuck as a support studio, forever toiling away in the Need for Speed and Battlefield mines. Instead of a mind-blowing new Burnout game, they're stuck making crappy modes for Battlefield 2042 that nobody's going to play anyway. Truly a fate worse than death. And number 8 is True Crime, but really Sleeping Dogs. Let's be real here. Everyone wants a new Sleeping Dogs. That game was great, a real viable alternative to Grand Theft Auto, and that's not an easy thing to do. It did its own thing. It was different. It was more arcadey, a little more action-packed without being a total cartoon like Saints Row. It struck just the right balance between serious and silly in a way that Grand Theft Auto doesn't. In a just world, the developer would have gone on to great success. There would have been multiple sequels. It could have been absolutely amazing. Instead, we got two kind of weird, mediocre true crime games, one great true crime game, and then they had to change the name because it was acquired by Square Enix, and one failed MMO follow-up that nobody wanted. The fact Sleeping Dogs managed to come out at all is a minor miracle. It was even more impressive that it was actually good, though. It should have been simple. Just make a sequel that was like the first one, but better. But, yeah, it's not that simple. If you look at the development history, you'll see just how bizarre of a production history United Front Games has. They made Mod Nation Racers, a Little Big Planet karting game, the definitive edition of Tomb Raider, just the definitive edition, nothing else. Sandwiched between that is a highly polished, big budget, open world action game. Like, maybe they were just incapable of making a follow-up. I just don't know what happened. There were plans to make Sleeping Dogs 2, but it never got off the ground. It would be absolutely awesome if some other talented studio could come in and continue where they left off, or if they would do it. Either way, but the likelihood of either happening is pretty low. Might as well be zero, honestly, from the looks. Still, even though it probably will never happen, it should. And number 7 is Spyro the Dragon. That guy. He's heavily rumored to fly again thanks to the newly independent Games for Bob, but at the time of this writing, we have no idea what their mystery game is. Could be a new IP, could be a Spyro sequel. We all want it to be. Will it be? I don't know. Once Insomniac was done with the series after 3 games, various publishers conspired to drive this series into the ground. First, we got Vivendi's embarrassingly bad Enter the Dragonfly, then bizarre Eurocom reboot games where Spyro is voiced by Frodo himself, Elijah Wood. Wait, Gary Oldman was in these things? David Spade as Sparks. That can't be real. It is, though. Those first 3 PlayStation games were great, though. I mean, this is Insomniac we're talking about. Those guys have been consistently good for the past 20 plus years. Toys for Bob, no slouch either. I mean, they did those Skylanders games, but they've been around forever. And their work on the Spyro remaster was absolutely stellar. After the Crash collection, they made Crash 4, so everyone expected they'd be doing a proper Spyro 4 eventually as well, and then they left Activision. So it seemed like the dream was dead. Then they turned around and immediately made a deal with Microsoft, so it's possible they're doing an actual Spyro game, and I hope they are. They made a lot of small but smart improvements to the remasters, and Crash 4 was absolutely excellent, barring the sometimes overturned difficulty. Spyro was never about precision platforming, though. It was more just about being a fun game with a unique moveset. No other game makes it as fun to charge around everywhere as Spyro does. Nobody does it like Spyro, period. It's a simple series, but the originals really still hold up. A proper modern sequel feels like a no-brainer. At number 6 is Crimson Skies. If all you had was an Xbox, you might not even be aware that Crimson Skies was a franchise. It actually started out on PC. The original game was super different from the more arcadey Xbox follow-up, but it's mostly still a real aviation game, which is just with slightly more forgiving physics. The PC original is a real classic, but the Xbox version is great too. They're very different games. The Xbox game, you kind of fly an R-Wing from Star Fox. Any semblance of simulation is kind of thrown out the window, but the alternate universe 1930s setting is awesome. The music was absolutely great. The mission design's top-notch. It's a series that really should have seen more success.
My cover's blown! Repeat! My cover's blown! I need backup! Attention, this settlement is operating in violation of David Dunbar's Anti-Piracy Act. You got me!
I think a modern Crimson Skies would really work. They could innovate by borrowing from something like Dark Void, where you occasionally get out of your plane and do a shootout on foot. Not something I do all the time. Again, to bring up Star Fox, all the on-foot crap did not work in that one Star Fox game. But, I mean, it would mix things up a little, and if you do it right, it's good. But, I mean, would they do it right? That lame Front Mission reboot game also did something like that. Wasn't great. So maybe I'm asking for the monkey's paw to curl with this one. But however this hypothetical unnamed mystery developer decides to modernize the series, I'd be there for it. At number 5, an actual new Castlevania game with all the remasters and remakes and DLCs that Konami is putting out for this series. Seriously, I mean, look back over the last decade. It's easy to forget that there hasn't been a new Castlevania since 2014. Wait, I lie. There's actually the Haunted Castle remake that came packed in with the Dominus collection. That's pretty much built from the ground up, but at the end of the day, it's still a remake. It is the closest thing to something new we've seen in the series for about 10 years. So any chance there is for hope, fans are going to take it. There's so many directions they could go with a new game. They could make a new classic game. They could go the Metroidvania route. Like, they could make a Lords of Shadow sequel. I'd be fine with that. It'll have to be better than Lords of Shadow 2. You couldn't make something worse if you tried. But still, if you're dying of thirst in the desert, you don't complain about what's in the canteen someone hands you. As long as it ain't poison, you drink it and you like it. Unless it's another Castlevania pachinko machine. Then get the hell out of here with that. Moving on to number 4, it's Ninja Gaiden, another series that's been away from the spotlight for quite a while. The NES games are classic, and Ninja Gaiden Black on the original Xbox is one of the best action games of all time, but after they flopped hard with one of the biggest unforced errors in gaming history with Ninja Gaiden 3, Team Ninja's pretty much moved on to other things. They still do good work, and all their recent games are pretty damn solid. But I can't help but wonder what this modern, revitalized version of Team Ninja could do if they return to their roots. It doesn't have to be Ninja Gaiden Black all over again. If they wanted, they could even make a new Souls-like style game. Just gotta have a jump button. Strong movement abilities are a major part of the identity of Ninja Gaiden, along with pretty high difficulty. So, obviously it couldn't be a straightforward Souls-like, but maybe they could bring back a somewhat more grounded reality like the original NES game, where a few places almost looked like the real world and there were CIA agents skulking around as opposed to the total fantasy world of the Xbox game. But this is another case where it doesn't really matter what they do. It'd just be nice if they did something new. And number 3 is Def Jam. These games were nuts. It's not really a surprise they didn't last long because they were totally reliant on licensing everything. Had to license appearances, music, absolutely everything. It would have been a fun game without rappers playing themselves, but that's really what pushes the game over the edge from an interesting curio to an all-time great. It was just so much friggin' fun. It was developed by Aki, or Akai, I don't really say the name of that developer often, the wrestling game guys, and it plays like a streamlined version of those games. It works though, because honestly it's a lot better than most wrestling games for back then, and even now. They just hit the perfect temp where fights are flashy flashy and fun, but they don't drag on too long, and they're really accessible. It's easy to jump in, jump out, play with friends, and that's the best way to play these games. Period. The first two games are all-time classics and have a pretty good cross-section of major acts from the early 2003s. Imagine if they made one of these things now. It'd be totally crazy, but also very unlikely. I loved these things as a kid. The music, the presentation, the real-world rappers. It's just so much friggin' fun. It feels like something you could only pull off in the 2000s. I can't see the biggest rappers lending their voices and appearances to something like this now. Other than Ice-T, he would probably do it. And number 2 is Siren. The first 2 Siren games developed by Japan Studio and published by Sony were straight up terrifying. They're some of the most unsettling horror games ever made, but outside of an ill-conceived attempt at a reboot with Siren Blood Curse, the series has been dead for almost 2 decades. They didn't catch on back in the early 2000s, but I think now they would have a much better chance of catching an audience. They're grungy, a little awkward to control. They have impenetrable stories that can only be fully understood after multiple playthroughs. That sort of thing wasn't generally understood as a positive back then, but now, oh, we love our obscure games, don't we?
Did you feel anything else? They are no longer demons. Be careful. It will be a while until you can move through.
The most impossibly opaque, the better. There's real potential for a revival, too. People love horror games now, especially spiritual successors to Silent Hill. Wowie. The main problem for any revival is Sony themselves. They've all but shuttered their Japan studio and don't seem that interested in publishing another game as strange and unsettling as this one. Its appeal is too limited for Sony looking for the next big live service hit, as if that's going to happen. They don't want moody horror games. They want Concord, which flopped horribly and cost like $200 million. Maybe they should go back to the single-player horror games, or just single-player games in general. It seems like Sony is going through one of those phases where they forgot why people like them. And finally, at number 1, Be Still My Beating Heart, Chrono Trigger. Chrono Cross makes this a bona fide franchise, but let's not fool anyone here. As much as Cross has its own fan following, and it does do stuff that expands the lore in weird ways, I like it, but we really want a new Chrono Trigger. A proper follow-up that is the same fast-paced and fun story, the time-hopping shenanigans, and that fantastic, iconic score. Chrono Cross did at least have that last one. The music for Chrono Cross is unparalleled. But for the most part, it's a completely different beast. The original Chrono Trigger is just a big standout from almost any RPG of that time. Hell, it's different from most of them even now. It stood the test of time, right? Appropriate given the theme. It's fast-paced, it's got this zippy momentum, you're never doing the same thing too many times. They're constantly introducing new things, new little gimmicks, new dungeons, new party members, new time periods. This game is just on the go the whole time. It's also one of the shortest of these Squaresoft RPG classics, but there is not a hint of fat on this thing. It is all killer, no filler. And most RPGs are like 90% filler. That's what people want. Sure, we all love the 100-hour behemoth every once in a while, but games don't need to be massively bloated to be good. In fact, bloated is bad. It doesn't mean the game is bad, but the bloat sure is. Chrono Trigger, perfect example of something without any that bloat. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.